Welcome back to Keys Consumer Math and Personal Finance, Section 1.5 continued. Before we do examples, we're going to go over the mathematical properties. You need to be able to know what I'm talking about when I say use the commutative property or use the associative property. Commutative property is simply commuting the numbers. When you commute, you go from one place to another. So basically the commutative property of addition says a plus b is equal to b plus a. It also works for multiplication. A times b equals b times a. So in other words, if you added 5 plus 4, that's the same thing as saying 4 plus 5. Both sides going to be 9. Or 5 times 4 is 20 is the same thing as saying 4 times 5, which is also 20. The commutative property does not work for subtraction, and it does not work for division. Now for subtraction, it would work if you used algebraic addition with that. So you could say that 5 plus a negative 4 is the same thing as negative 4 plus 5. The sign just has to go with the negative. Commutative property again works with addition and multiplication, and if you're going to have a negative sign in there, it goes with the number. The associative property is a little different. It associates numbers. So for addition, you're associating a plus b first. You can think of them as friends, and then c's on the outside. But then b is a little fickle, and he decides, I don't want to hang out with a anymore. So I'm going to I'm going to associate with c. So a plus b in parentheses plus c is equivalent to a plus b plus c. A plus, and then parentheses b plus c. In other words, I could add 2 plus 3 together, and then 4, which 2 plus 3 is 5, and 5 plus 4 is 9. Or I could say a, 2 plus, I could do what's in parentheses here first, 3 plus 4, and get 7, and 2 plus 7 is also equal to 9. So I can associate across addition and use the associative property. I can also do that with multiplication. In other words, parentheses a times b times c is equivalent to a times b times c in parentheses. Or I could say 2 times 3 in parentheses times 4 is equivalent to 2 times parentheses 3 times 4. On the left side, if I do order of operations, I do what's inside first. I get 6 times 4, which is 24. Or I could say 2 times 3 times 4, which I finish first because it's in parentheses, is 12. 2 times 12 is also 24. So you see how they are equivalent to each other. We have the identity properties. The additive identity is 0. That means if I take any number and I add 0 to it, I get the same number I started with, or the identical number I started with. So the additive identity is 0. The multiplicative identity is what number can I multiply by any number and get that same number again, or the identical number. It would be 1. The multiplicative identity is 1, so a times 1 equals a. Now, the additive inverse we talked about in the previous section is the same thing as just its opposite. So I could take a and I could add any number or its opposite to it. Not any number, I could add its opposite to it. And when I take a number and I add its additive inverse, I get 0, or the additive identity. The multiplicative inverse is its reciprocal. I can take any number and I can multiply it by its multiplicative inverse or its reciprocal, and a times 1 over a, it's going to give me the multiplicative identity of 1. I want to do a little example with this one though. I could take this number 2/3. Its multiplicative identity would be 3/2, just as reciprocal. And when I multiply 2 times 3 over 3 times 2, I get 6 over 6. And 6 divided by 6 is 1. It always works. The property I want to talk to you about is the distributive property. That is when you distribute multiplication over addition or subtraction. So basically, I'm taking this A and I'm multiplying it by everything inside the parentheses. You know, by order of operations, you add what's in parentheses first and then you multiply. But you could distribute this A to everything inside first. You could say A times B is AB, and A times C is AC. And if you add them together, you get the same thing as A times B plus C. We'll do an example in a minute. It also works with subtraction. You can distribute over multiplication over subtraction. So we get A times parentheses B minus C is the same thing as saying AB minus AC. Let's look at this example. Is 5 times parentheses 3 plus 1 the same thing as if I distributed 5 to the 3, so we get 5 times 3, and then 5 to the 1. Let's see. If I do order of operations, 3 plus 1 is 4, so here 5 times 4 equals 20. Now let's check it on the other side. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 5 times 1 is 5, and 15 plus 5 is in fact 20. So that works. Same thing happens with subtraction. If I do order of operations, let me distribute first. So we're going to say 6 times 4 minus 3 is the same thing as saying 6 times 4 minus 6 times 3. So if I do order of operations first, I get 6 times 4 minus 3, which is 1, which is equivalent to 6. Or I could say 6 times 4 is 24, and 6 times 3 is 18, and 24 minus 18 is also 6.